The snow was falling quietly over the empty streets of Boston, covering everything in a soft, white silence. Inside a small, dim apartment on the third floor of an old building, a young man sat alone with his back against the wall, staring at a cracked phone screen that had stopped ringing weeks ago. His name was Daniel Reed, 30 years old. No job, no savings, no direction left. Only silence and regret. Just a year earlier, Daniel had everything most people chase their entire lives: a stable corporate job in a respected company, a decent salary, a future that looked safe. But Daniel made a choice. He quit, not because he was ready, but because he was tired. Tired of waking up every day, feeling like someone else was controlling his life. Tired of working hard for a dream that didn't feel like his own. Tired of pretending he was okay. He told himself it was courage, but deep down, it was fear disguised as bravery. Fear of staying stuck forever. So he left. And at first, it felt like freedom. No meetings, no deadlines, no pressure, just endless time. But time without direction becomes a prison. Within months, savings disappeared, bills started piling up, confidence slowly turned into doubt, friends stopped calling, opportunities stopped coming. And Daniel, once full of ambition, now found himself sitting in silence every night, wondering how everything collapsed so fast. That night in Boston, the electricity in his apartment flickered, then went out completely. Darkness filled the room. No light, no sound, just his breathing. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall and whispered to himself, "I messed everything up." For a moment, he laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was painfully true. He had chased freedom and ended up trapped. He had chased happiness and ended up empty. He closed his eyes, expecting the usual thoughts of regret to return, but something different happened. A memory came back, his father's voice. Years ago, when Daniel was just starting college, his father had said one sentence that he never understood at the time. "Son, life doesn't reward intention. It rewards consistency." Back then, Daniel ignored it. He thought success came from big decisions, big risks, big moments. But sitting in that dark room with nothing left, he finally understood. It was never about the big moment. It was about what you do when no one is watching. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, not because he was motivated, but because he had nothing else left. He stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized himself. Tired eyes, messy hair, a face that looked like it had given up too many times. For a second, he almost sat back down, but instead, he said something quietly to himself. "This can't be the end of my story." That was the first real decision he made in a long time. Not to succeed, not to become rich, not to impress anyone, but simply not to quit. Daniel started small. He cleaned his apartment, not because it mattered to the world, but because it mattered to his mind. Then he started waking up at the same time every day, even when he had nowhere to go. Even when there was nothing waiting for him. He began reading again, not fantasy, not entertainment, but books about discipline, psychology, business, and human behavior. At first, nothing made sense. His attention span was broken. His focus was weak. His mind kept drifting back to failure, but he continued anyway because he realized something important. You don't rebuild a life in a day. You rebuild it in repetition. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel started going outside again. He didn't have a job, so he found small freelance tasks online. Writing, simple design work, anything he could learn quickly. His first job paid him $12. $12 for hours of work. Most people would laugh at that. Daniel didn't. He framed it in his mind differently. It wasn't $12. It was proof that he was still capable, still useful, still in the game. He kept going. Some days were better. Most days were not. There were moments he almost gave up again. Moments where he would sit in the kitchen, staring at empty walls, thinking, maybe I'm just not built for this. But every time that thought came, another voice appeared in his mind, quieter, stronger. You're not failing, you're rebuilding. And slowly, something began to change. His work improved. His skills sharpened, his discipline strengthened. Clients started coming back. Not many, just a few, but enough to keep going. 1 year later, Daniel was no longer surviving. He was building. 2 years later, he was running small projects consistently. 3 years later, he had formed a small digital agency working with clients from different states. But the most important change wasn't money, it was identity. Daniel was no longer the man who gave up. He was the man who stayed. Years passed, and one evening, Daniel found himself standing in a modern office in downtown Chicago. Glass walls, city lights, a team working around him. The same city where he once sat alone in a broken apartment with no electricity. He walked to the window and looked outside. Traffic moving, people rushing, life continuing. And for a moment, he remembered that night, the darkness, the silence, the hopelessness. He smiled quietly because he understood something most people never do. His success didn't begin when his business grew. It began the night everything collapsed. Because collapse forces clarity. It removes excuses. It removes distractions. It removes everything fake. What remains is truth. And truth either breaks you or builds you. That night in the dark apartment didn't destroy Daniel. It introduced him to the version of himself he was supposed to become. Later that evening, Daniel received a message from a young freelancer asking for advice. The message said, "I feel like I'm stuck. Nothing is working for me. I think I should quit." Daniel stared at it for a moment. Then he replied, "Don't confuse slow progress with no progress. The version of you you're trying to become is built through repetition, not emotion. Keep going, even when it feels pointless, especially then." He sent the message, then sat back, because he remembered that exact feeling, the feeling of wanting to quit when nothing is happening. And he realized something powerful. Most people don't fail because they are not capable. They fail because they stop too early. Not at the end, but right before the breakthrough. That night, Daniel turned off the office lights, walked outside into the cool air, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because he knew who he had become. And if life ever knocked him down again, he knew exactly what to do. Not panic, not quit, not run, just rebuild. Again and again, until the story changes.